He was good to me, just not when it mattered. And I didn't realize that at first. Not until one night, when something so small happened, that I almost ignored it. But that moment, it changed how I saw everything. It was late. I remember checking the time. 2:13 a.m. I was sitting on my bed in the dark, phone in my hand, staring at the same message I had sent almost an hour earlier. Hey, are you okay? Nothing serious. Just a simple message. But something felt off that night, and I couldn't explain why. Then I saw it. Seen. And for a second, I felt relieved. Like, okay, he's there. But then, nothing. No reply. No, I'm good. No, I'll text you later. Just silence. And I told myself not to overthink it. He's probably busy. Maybe he'll reply in a minute. So I waited. 5 minutes. 10. 30. Still nothing. And I hate to admit this, but I kept refreshing the chat. Like somehow it would change. Like if I just waited long enough, it would make sense again. Eventually, I fell asleep with my phone still in my hand. And the next morning, I woke up to a message from him. Hey, that was it. No explanation. No acknowledgement of the night before. Just, hey. And I remember staring at that message. Longer than I should have. Trying to figure out how to respond. Because part of me wanted to say something. Wanted to ask, why did you ignore me? But the other part of me didn't want to make it a big deal. Didn't want to seem like I was asking for too much. Over something that could be nothing. So I did what I always did. I replied like it didn't bother me. Like it didn't mean anything. And for a moment, I convinced myself it really didn't. Because when he was present, he felt different. He'd call. He'd laugh. He'd talk like everything between us was easy. And in those moments, I'd forget nights like that. I'd tell myself, see, this is who he really is. But then it would happen again. Not the exact same way, but the same feeling. A delay. A silence. A moment where I felt less important than I thought I was. And the confusing part, he was never completely gone. Just inconsistent. Close enough to keep me there, but distant enough to make me question everything. And I remember thinking, maybe this is normal. Maybe I'm just expecting too much. Maybe this is what being patient looks like. So instead of asking questions, I adjusted. I stopped double texting. I stopped saying how I felt right away. I started waiting longer before replying, just so I wouldn't seem too available. And the more I adjusted, the more I started noticing something I didn't want to admit. It wasn't just him changing. I was too. Becoming quieter, more careful, more aware of how I might come across, instead of how I actually felt. And I didn't like that feeling, but I ignored it, because I kept telling myself, at least he's still here. And back then, that felt like enough. Wait, I will tell you what to do. At first, I told myself it wasn't a big deal, because one night doesn't mean anything, right? People get busy. People forget to reply. That's normal. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. But it didn't just happen once. It started showing up in small ways. Ways that were easy to excuse. Easy to overlook. If you didn't want to see it too clearly. Like the afternoon I sent him something funny. Just a random video I knew he'd laugh at. He saw it. And didn't reply. Hours went by. Then later that night, he called me. Laughing. talking like everything was normal. And I remember smiling, laughing with him, like that silence earlier didn't even happen. But somewhere in the back of my mind, I noticed it, the pattern, not clear enough to confront, but clear enough to feel, because it wasn't just about replies anymore. It was about timing. When he showed up, and when he didn't, I started noticing that when I needed him, when I was overwhelmed, when I felt off, he was there, instantly. What's wrong? Talk to me. I'm here. And in those moments, it felt real. It felt like he cared, like I mattered. But then, the moment I was okay again, he'd pull back. Not completely, just enough. Enough to make me question it, but not enough to call it out. And that's what made it confusing, because he never did anything you could clearly point at and say, that's the problem. He didn't argue. He didn't say anything hurtful. He just disappeared in small ways, quietly. And that kind of distance, it's harder to explain, because you can't prove it. You just feel it. And I felt it more and more, until I started doing something I didn't even realize at first. I started holding things in, not because I wanted to, but because I knew what would happen if I didn't. If I seemed too okay, too stable, too put together, he'd fade again. So I stopped sharing everything. I stopped saying, I'm actually doing better. I downplayed it, kept parts of myself quiet, just to keep him close. And that's when it started to hit me. Not all at once, but slowly. This wasn't just about him anymore. I was changing too. Not into someone better, but into someone smaller. And the scariest part, I didn't even know if he noticed, or if this was exactly what he wanted. Because the more I needed him, the more he stayed. And back then, I still thought that meant something. It didn't hit me all at once. It was slow, quiet, the kind of realization that builds over time, until you can't ignore it anymore. I started paying attention, not to what he said, but to when he showed up. And when he didn't, that's when things started to feel different, not confusing anymore, just uncomfortable, because the pattern was there. I just didn't want to name it yet. When I was overwhelmed, when I felt like I needed someone, he was there, instantly. What's wrong? Talk to me. I'm here. And in those moments, it felt real. It felt like love. But when I was okay, when I wasn't leaning on him, when I handled things on my own, he pulled back. Every time. Not dramatically. Not in a way you could easily explain. Just enough to make me feel it. And that's when it stopped feeling random. It was predictable. Almost like he knew exactly when to show up and when to disappear. That's when the question changed. It wasn't, does he care? It became, what does he actually care about? And I didn't like the answer, because the more I thought about it, the more I realized it wasn't really me. Not fully. It was the version of me that needed him, the version that depended on him, the version that made him feel important. Because every time I stood on my own, every time I didn't need reassurance, every time I was okay without him, it was like I became less interesting, less worth showing up for. And that realization, it didn't feel dramatic. It felt quiet. The kind of quiet that sits in your chest and doesn't go away. Because it forced me to see something I had been avoiding the entire time. I wasn't just reacting to his behavior anymore. I was starting to understand it. And once you understand something like that, you can't unsee it. You can't go back to pretending it's just bad timing, or stress, or coincidence. It becomes clear, too clear. And the hardest part, realizing that everything I thought was love might not have been love at all. It might have just been control. Once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. Every interaction started to feel different. Not because he changed, but because I did. I stopped focusing on what he said and started noticing what he didn't do. The moments he pulled back, the silence that showed up right when I was okay. And suddenly, it didn't feel confusing anymore. It felt intentional, not obvious, not something you could easily explain to someone else, but clear enough that I couldn't ignore it anymore. So I did something different. I didn't confront him. I didn't ask questions. I just stopped. I stopped reaching out first. I stopped sharing every little thing I was going through. I stopped making him the center of how I processed my own emotions. And I let myself be okay, without involving him in it. At first, nothing changed, which almost made me question myself again. But then slowly, the distance grew. The messages became shorter, less frequent, less interested, until one day, it felt like I was talking to a stranger. And that was the confirmation I didn't want, but needed, because it showed me something I had been avoiding the entire time. He wasn't losing me. He was losing control. And without that, there was nothing left for him to hold on to. No reason to stay as close. No reason to keep showing up the same way. And as painful as that realization was, it gave me something I didn't have before. Clarity. Not the kind that makes you emotional, but the kind that makes you quiet, still, certain. Because in that moment, I finally understood something I had been missing the entire time. I wasn't losing him. I was finally seeing him. I thought it would hurt more. Walking away. Letting it go. Letting him go. But it didn't. Not in the way I expected. Because by the time I got there, I had already done the hardest part. I had already seen the truth. And once you see something clearly, you don't need closure the same way anymore. You don't need explanations. You don't need them to admit it. You just understand. So I didn't confront him. I didn't ask why. I didn't try to make him explain something I already felt in my gut. I just stopped. Stopped reaching. Stopped waiting. Stopped holding on to something that was never really holding on to me. And for the first time in a long time, I felt calm. Not happy. Not relieved. Just calm. Like something inside me had finally settled. Because I wasn't trying to figure him out anymore. I wasn't trying to make it make sense. I wasn't trying to be who he needed me to be, just to keep him close. I just let it end. And the surprising part, he didn't fight for it. He didn't chase. He didn't try to fix anything. He just let it fade. And instead of breaking me, that confirmed everything. Because real love doesn't disappear when you stop needing it. It doesn't fade when you finally stand on your own. It stays. It shows up. It chooses you, not your broken pieces. And in that moment, I realized something I wish I had understood earlier. I didn't lose someone who loved me. I let go of someone who only loved the version of me that made him feel needed. And that That's not love. That's something else. Something I'm no longer willing to carry.